When I was a kid, my mom was friends with the famous singer Evelyn Champagne King, who sang, "Love come down. Ooh, you make my love come down." I was obsessed with Evelyn and her music, so I always begged my mom to go over to Evelyn's house. And whenever we did, I'd be grinning so hard walking up all the cracked concrete stairs through her busted and wobbly screen door and right into her wood-paneled living room. Evelyn would let me put the records on while she and my mom went in her room to change. And as soon as the music came on, Evelyn and my mom would bust through the beaded curtains wearing sparkly black sweaters, and I'd be sitting on the floor by the record player looking up at my mom and Evelyn singing and dancing to her own songs. When I got a little older and was flipping through my mom's albums, I came across one of Evelyn's records and saw that my mom's friend Evelyn was not Champagne Evelyn. She was just Evelyn from Kimball, West Virginia. But I wasn't sad at all because my mom and Evelyn had created a soft space for me by making my fantasy real. Those moments of softness came before I knew what poverty and racism was where I grew up in West Virginia and in the rest of the world. That softness came before I knew how exhausting and painfully hard the world is for a lot of us. But we all know that shit, so I ain't gonna spend too much time talking about it. But I will spend a lot of time talking about softness and how you can create it in your own life. As a writer, I've made the practice of cataloging these soft moments. I journal them, I have a running tab on my laptop, and sometimes I even share them on Facebook so other people can join in. I pull out the essence of these moments and replicate them. Each moment is a model for me, so I will share some of my catalog with you here today. Growing up, my mom was a cook at our little elementary school tucked up against the mountains. She'd speak to every single kid who came through the lunch line. And not only did she speak, she sincerely asked how they were doing. And even though she wasn't supposed to, my mom saved food for kids who didn't have a lot at home, which was common. She'd stand outside by the buses every single day and pass out the food she saved, even though she could have gotten fired. So that was my mom creating softness for others by challenging institutional business as usual. And a little older, when I was in the 4th grade, I used to draw a lot in class. It always got in trouble. One time I drew a toilet bowl full of turds labeled Mr. Stewart's Turds. I passed the drawing to a student and they snickered. Then they passed it to another student and they snickered. Mr. Stewart saw the drawing being passed around, but he didn't know what it was, so he told me, "Since you want to pass your little drawing around, why don't you come up here and draw it on the board so everybody can see it?" I went up there, I drew the big toilet bowl and the turds, then I drew a huge speech bubble, just like I had on the page that said, "I couldn't wait to get out of that motherfucker." The class said, "Ooh." Mr. Stewart called my mom to the class and I got a spanking in front of the class, but that ain't stopped me from drawing. So eventually, Mr. Stewart marked a section of the board off just for me. He said I can draw on it before class, during recess, and during breaks. So even though I called him a motherfucker, he made softness for me by sharing some space on his blackboard. And I grew up a little bit more. When I was first in the Navy on a submarine for 2 months, I was kicking it with this black dude from LA. All he talked about was pad thai, pad thai, pad thai. He said that was the first thing he was gonna do when he got off the sub in Guam was go eat pad thai. So we finally got off the sub and we was crossing the street and he was still talking about pad thai. I told him I never had it, didn't even know what it was. He stopped me dead in the street and started dancing around me like, "Pad thai, nigga, you ain't never had no pad thai?" I told him we ain't have pad thai in West Virginia. He said, "How have you lived your life?" So he just kept dancing all the way down the street until we got to the restaurant, and he ordered 2 pad thais. And on the first bite, I was like, pad thai, nigga, how have I lived my life? A little later after that, I had a child. It was a single parent for a little bit. And it was other young black men who helped me with my daughter. They picked her up from school, gave me money, babysat her, cooked, took her to art museums, to the zoo, did art projects, all kinds of stuff. Some of them even canceled their own dates so I could go on a date every once in a while. And that's a story you usually don't hear about single young black men. But they created softness for me by sharing their personal, emotional, and financial resources. And soon after that, so when I climbed Mount Fuji for the first time, I had a cold, so I was a little slower than the rest of my group. We all thought we'd just go up real quick and come back down. They did, but I was coming down when it was getting dark, which was fine at first because the moon was bright and I could see, until I got below the tree line into the dense and dark forest. I was scared and alone until I bumped into this old Japanese man who was also lost, but he was using his flip cell phone as a flashlight. I grabbed the back of his shirt while he tried to lead us out. Then his phone died. Everything went black. I started cussing him out, and I'm pretty sure he was cussing me out in Japanese. We linked arms after we calmed down. We stumbled and tripped over tree roots and rocks until we found our way out about an hour later. The moon was back and the lights from the base of the shops at the mountain. We grinned and hugged each other so tight. We went into one of the shops, we sat and ate ramen, and in between slurps, we smiled at each other. So that was him creating softness for me by sharing what little light he had with my lost ass. So I've talked about a lot of wins when people have made soft spots for me. My mom and Evelyn made floating my fantasy. My 4th grade teacher sharing some space on his blackboard. My mom challenging institutional business as usual. My homie dancing with me with my first time trying some food. And my other homies sharing their personal resources with me. And that old Japanese man, a stranger, sharing his small light with me. Now I will talk about the nouns. Now that I've grown up to be a novelist, a professor, a performer, an editor, and a community organizer, my catalog of softness keeps me afloat and gives me joy, but it also inspires me to do the necessary work of creating softness in my own life so others can do what they do too. Like when I met a woman from Venezuela named Alicia Markowitz. She wanted to write about her childhood in Venezuela, her trauma and her abuse and her healing, but she had no connections to the writing world or had any formal training. But when we spoke over the phone and she told me her story, her passion made me feel everything she said. So for the next 3 years, we worked together until her memoir was finished and edited. I gave her whatever resources I had for the writing world. So that was me sharing some space on my blackboard and helping float her fantasy and dancing along with her for her first time writing a book. I also get invited to do a lot of readings. And oftentimes, I'm the only Black or person of color in the lineup. So for the last few years, I've refused to do the readings unless the organizers can get other people of color on the lineup. If they can't or won't do that, I don't do the reading. I understand that I'm limiting my possibilities and opportunities, but I'm also helping making opportunities for other people. Like my mom challenging institutional business as usual. It's also why most of the books I write reviews for are written by Black women, because stats show that their books don't get reviewed as much as white men and white women. Recently, there was a film adapted from my first novel, Potted Meat. The director, Corey Warner, asked me to be involved with the decision making as far as writing the script, filming location, and finding actors. I said that I wanted the film to be filmed in my hometown and that the actors had to be from my town also. Luckily, Corey had the same vision. So this was a case of him enthusiastically making space for me and us making space for others who may not have had the chance to be in the film. So yes, I do all of these things not because of who I am. I do these things because of why I am. And why I am is because of who all of these folks were to me, the way they treated me softly in an otherwise harsh world. Cataloging softness helps me recognize it in the past and the present, and it reminds me to recreate it in the present and the future. And the cool shit is, we all have our own unique catalogs. There's an abundance of softness. So the beauty of this practice is you can take all of this abundance, find it in your life, and recreate it. You can apply it to whatever you do, wherever you do it, and for whoever needs it. So look for the softness in your life, pull out the essence of it, and then be intentional about recreating it. Thank y'all.